What is up, guys? Mike here. You're watching another episode of Woody's Pictures, and today we're talking about 2004's Troy. If you haven't watched my channel before, basically what I do is I sit down and I talk about movies from a contextual and thematic standpoint, kind of talk about the production, the themes, how it reflects in the time in which it was made, and how society may have impacted its creation, instead of just simply talking about acting and directing and lighting and all of the other general film criticism topics, I guess. So, as many people probably have following the Odyssey's release, I went back to revisit 2004's Troy, and it's quite a mixed bag. It's quite an interesting film. This movie definitely came on the coattails of Gladiator after Gladiator released, won a bunch of Oscars and a made a lot of money. Old Hollywood said, maybe we should revisit these historical epics. Maybe there's something to be said here after all. Previously, historical epics um, on a grand scale with a large cast were considered to be very risky. They cost a lot of money and they kind of fumbled around the star system during the era of like Cleopatra and Mutiny on the Bounty and things of that nature. And then Gladiator came and kind of repositioned the perspective of Hollywood. So after Gladiator made a ton of money, they said, "Hey, look at the Iliad. That's a great story, a great opportunity to look at a similar genre. Let's get a whole big cast together." And the cast here is pretty astounding. We've got Brad Pitt, obviously, Eric Bana, Orlando Bloom, Diane Kruger, Sean Bean, Brian Cox, the legendary Peter O'Toole, Brendan Gleeson, Rose Byrne. I mean, incredible cast. And between the cast, the production design, and the scale of this movie, it cost a pretty penny and must have been pretty complex to produce and direct. So um, I think it's interesting to look at this film from the viewpoint of, Gladiator's success, because I think one of the biggest flaws that Troy has is it does feel a little cash grabby. I'm not going to lie, it does feel a little bit like this is a good idea, let's make it. And I don't know if enough depth and uh, narrative, I guess, attention was given to the characters of the film. I mean, they certainly are interesting. Eric Bana's Hector is great. I think he's probably the best part of the movie, but there's really not a whole lot to sink your teeth in from a character perspective, and I think that is probably Troy's biggest weakness. Now, I said I didn't want to just talk about traditional criticisms, but I do want to sort of, present that idea in the lens of this being sort of a Hollywood cash grab. I mean, and I don't mean to insult it because there is stuff to appreciate here. And if you do love the movie Troy, then I don't want to kind of rub you the wrong way by calling it a cash grab. I think it has a lot of incentive behind it, again, following Gladiator and revisiting the idea of this crazy historical epic. Now, what this film does most impressively is its scale. I mean, the sweeping army shots with everybody running against each other and the action sequences. I mean, it is impressive in today's day and age where movies like this, unless they're directed by Christopher Nolan or Denis Villeneuve or something, they're probably using a soundstage and a whole lot of CG to create armies this large. So it is really cool to see a big set and all of these people in costume, all of this choreography, everything that's going on. I mean, that is definitely what I love about Troy the most. Just seeing all the effort and the attention to detail, all of the costumes that had to be made for this, and just all of the effort and really just you know, I guess that's it. The effort and the attention to detail. Um, but yeah, that's great. The battle sequences I think really hold up well. When Brad Pitt's Achilles faces off against Eric Bana's Hector, I think that is one of the highlights of the movie. And then of course you have the legendary Peter O'Toole here, who comes from maybe the most notable historical epic of all time in Lawrence of Arabia. Kind of a cool nod to see him in this film. But I think that there are some interesting approaches that were taken to the film. It was written by David Benioff, who you may know, who would go on to pen the Game of Thrones series, which was extremely successful and extremely entertaining up until the point where Mr. Benioff ran out of source material. But this isn't a Game of Thrones video because Lord knows I could talk about that for a very long time. But you kind of see the early glimpses of the sort of ancient political drama going on here from David Benioff. I think what's interesting about this film as well is they don't really lean into the Greek mythology. I don't know if that was maybe leaning on the success of Gladiator or just making it more grounded and realistic. Like they take the Iliad, they remove all of um, the gods that actually appear in the Iliad. I mean, in this film, it's treated like traditional religion, right? It's like, oh, pray to Athena, Apollo's temple, Apollo's upset, Poseidon's upset. It's very much like the way religion might be approached today. Whereas in the source material, these gods are essentially characters in the story. So they decided to remove that and modernizing it. I don't know if that really works against it or works in its favor. I don't think it was really a red flag for me, but I think adding those elements in may have given it more of a mystical, memorable vibe, I guess. Um, yeah, and I think while this was a fascinating movie from a production standpoint, you kind of know the story beats, and when you remove the fantastical, religious, or mythological elements, it kind of, I guess, if you're familiar with that story, you're kind of missing it. And Wolfgang Peterson directed this film, famous for Das Boot, Air Force One, Perfect Storm, and he never really was known for his characters, and he doesn't have the same ability to build an enormous atmospheric character piece like Ridley Scott was able to do with Gladiator. But I think that there's still a lot to say about this movie. That's positive. I think people that kind of grew up with this film really appreciated it. It feels very 2000s, feels very nostalgic in a sense. Um, my wife, I watched this with my wife, who is a big Orlando Bloom fan, and this was the first time she had seen it, and she said, "I'm glad I didn't watch this when I was younger because it would have ruined Orlando Bloom for me." Because, again, if you know the movie, he plays Paris, who kind of uh, is a coward until the end, where he experiences the end of his character arc. But there's not a whole lot to go into here. I think through the lens of the Odyssey, we do. The Odyssey is definitely more fantastical, right? And Odysseus is in this film. He is in Troy. But the Odyssey obviously goes into, you know, the more fantastical elements of Homer's work. And the story itself does, obviously, as well. So that's to be said. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, I want to point out that the Odyssey also sort of treats the gods as modern day figures aside from Odysseus's visions of Athena. So there is some similarity there. I think what really makes the Odyssey so much more impactful, not only from a clear cinematic standpoint, but also just the fact that Christopher Nolan puts so much character work into Odysseus, into his story, into his background, and yeah, you just really feel the weight of it. The other difference is when you look at the raid of Troy in the Odyssey, it's definitely seen as a one-sided affair. The Greeks are clearly the good guys. Granted, that's not black and white. the whole concept of the film. If you watch my Odyssey video, like I said, it's all about the lack of morality in the raid of Troy. But when you see the film Troy, that is made much more clear in a way that we see the Trojans as characters. There aren't any Trojan characters that we spend time with in the Odyssey. They're seen as sort of the enemy, right? And you can make an argument in Troy that the Trojans are the good the good guys. I mean, they did steal Helen of Troy, but other than that, they're kind of just minding their own business. Maybe they could have settled this a little bit more peacefully. I don't know, but yeah, I mean that's I'm kind of ranting now, but I just wanted to make a quick video to talk about Troy. I think that I saw it was trending on Amazon. I think a lot of people are revisiting it now after watching the Odyssey, and um, 22 years later, the context of the film is pretty interesting. I think while it may not have been received very positively upon its release, there is still a lot to appreciate. I really love the historical epic nature of the production and how it's just very cool to see like hundreds and thousands of people run at each other in armor, and actually know that that was shot and not superimposed by a computer. Because as time goes further and further along in this medium, that's going to be less and less common. So, yeah, if you guys have seen Troy, what'd you think about it? How would you compare it to the Odyssey? And I think that's all I got for today. This is Mike. Thanks for watching Woody's Pictures. Catch you guys next time.